feature presentation.
Welcome back to the 8th best movie podcast in Canada.
You didn't mention that for the Groot episode.
I know, because it was short. I didn't have time. I still did 18 minutes on I Am Groot, so go check that out. That's available right now. But welcome to Untitled Movie Reviews. Today, we are reviewing the first, 4 episodes of Marvel Studios' She-Hulk. Completely spoiler-free.
Objection, Your Honor.
She-Hulk Attorney at Law, my bad. We are reviewing the first 4 episodes. This is going to be completely spoiler free. The only things we will talk about are general kind of overall thoughts on this show. Any details from plots or anything like that will only be stuff that we've seen in trailers. So if you're one of those people who have completely gone radio silent and don't watch any trailers, you probably aren't watching or listening to this anyway. But we will talk about details that were in the main trailers, and I know they've been releasing even more stuff the last couple days about She-Hulk and giving a little bit more away with her origin and different things like that. But the series stars Tatiana Maslany, Mark Ruffalo, Ginger Gonzaga, Jameela Jamil, Josh Segarra, John Bass, Tim Roth, Benedict Wong. We know Charlie Cox is in the series, as well as many, many more. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm going to plead the fifth, Matt.
That's not enough. Just law terms the whole time. Yeah, how are you actually though?
I'm good. It's interesting going into something like this because a lot of the narrative behind it has kind of been shaped by the VFX.
Yeah, which we'll get into.
First trailer specifically, a lot of people, and including ourselves, were somewhat critical of, is this kind of production being, television versus film? Is it being rushed?
Oh, Eric's gone. Eric's gone. Will he come back?
It's one of those things.
I know. Oh, he's back. He's back.
Yes.
Back.
So I was just literally rambling about how, there's been a conversation about the VFX and specifically if it's being rushed, especially, television versus film.
There's a great article that I shared on my Twitter about a lot of the Marvel specifically, but just the state of Hollywood and VFX studios, which I believe was on Gizmodo. Was that what it was? Anyways, go check out my Twitter. It's on there. But
yeah,
good points.
Yeah, and so going into this, if you have seen the trailer, if you've read any articles on it, it's one of those things where I think that can kind of play a bias or an influence, and so watching this, you have to kind of take it at what it is, which is kind of a riff on law shows, whether
Ally McBeal
or the original Perry Mason, which Tatiana Maslany was on the HBO revisionist version of that,
right?
Or even Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, which kind of, there's a couple episodes that reminded me of Harvey Birdman. I mean,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
There's one bit that involves The Sopranos where it's like there's not that the actual episode structure is the same or the characters, but the idea of taking the MCU and putting it through the legal system is kind of the main objective here, with it kind of being sort of a fourth wall breaking meta tone that, obviously for fans of that genre will think of Deadpool, and then for people outside of the MCU will think of something like Fleabag, where you have the main character kind of talking to the audience directly, and whether it be references to other continuity that's happened in the MCU already, or just something that's kind of like, can you believe that this is happening?
I think, or even referencing people's thoughts on the MCU and on Twitter and things like that. Like, there are fun moments like that.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between this not being as obnoxious as the Deadpool movies is that Maslany is not, a caricature compared to
she's awesome
Ryan Reynolds, who kind of just like literally is one note. Where I think Maslany can play into the humor well, but also kind of still personify both the human and Hulk forms of Jennifer Walters, and I think that she really is the reason to watch this show, in the same way that Simu Liu in Shang-Chi and Eamon Vellani
Miss
are,
Marvel,
like it
really great casting. Just the Canadians.
MCU CanCon is just what we should call this from now on, because they like, it's our time to shine, and seeing, you know, these amazing actors get I mean, obviously Maslany, like, she already had Orphan Black,
Right.
and she was in David Gordon Green's Stronger and Karen Kusama's Destroyer, and has a profile in the US, and obviously even before that in Canada with movies like Picture Day and Blood Pressure. But it was just always like, you were always hearing about her in casting calls, kind of
always being
being
like
the second or third,
Yeah.
and it's like, she is so good in this. And like, as you know, the She-Hulk, but also as just Jennifer, like, you're watching her and she's giving this incredibly fun and charismatic performance, but also there's more nuance in there than even the scripts and the direction gives, that kind of make the character more just integral to the stories, but also just personable. Like, she is just a very relatable person in your 30s, that it's just like, okay, like,
I
this
totally
this
agree.
works.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I really, really, really liked these first 4 episodes. I just felt like it was completely enjoyable, each episode. It is more episodic. It doesn't necessarily have like a a narrative through line. I think they're planting the seeds for that. I know it's supposed to be, isn't it, like 9 episodes or 10 maybe? So I think
think
there's
it's
still some
9,
time.
yeah.
9, yeah, 9 episodes, because they're half hour, 40 minutes. But I'm just like, yeah, I think Tatiana Maslany is like, again, first and foremost, she's just so charismatic and so enjoyable to watch, that I feel like that's what really carries this series. Even if it being like, oh, an episode, maybe the law plot of that episode you're not super into, or something like that. But I just feel like any time which she's on screen for the majority of the runtime, that I just was like, man, she is so natural or organic, where I just believe her as Jennifer Walters, and just enjoyable to watch, both as She-Hulk and as Jen, that like I just thought just super, super enjoyable, to the point where it distracts you from the janky CG. Because
Which
like
there is a lot of that. It's
yeah,
questionable.
it does have that uncanny valley kind of thing, which is, it doesn't solve it in this show. I think it's probably, when you watch this in 4K and Dolby Vision and stuff like that, it might look a little bit better than on the screeners we watched, but it still has that. It's weird, because Mark Ruffalo and the Hulk is a big part of this series as well. And watching it, I'm like, oh, they've had 10 years to develop what his character looks like, the character model that they probably borrowed it from the movies that they spent, you know, way more money on than this show. So the Hulk always, to me, looks really good. Like, and then when you have Jen beside him in a lot of those scenes, there's something that, like, because she's just supposed to be this 6'7" kind of like hulking woman, and not like this giant creature like the Hulk is, that there's this uncanny valley thing, because you still look at her as, just this sounds weird, but like a large woman. So when her mouth isn't necessarily matching, because you can tell it's that digital, the mouth, it's always the mouth, Eric. It's
Well, the
always
mouth
the
and
mouth
the eyes are
and
the
the
two
eyes.
things that
Yeah.
have always been problems with the evolution of
And
motion
human-like
capture.
characters.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like when it's a monster, if it's Thanos, because he looks otherworldly, right? The Hulk
Like
looks
Grimace.
otherworldly, where I'm like, I suspension of disbelief makes me go, I'm not nitpicking how this looks, because
But when you
I don't know.
anthropomorphize the
Yes.
characters and make them look more like the actors, it becomes more of that uncanny valley thing.
Yes.
But I think also on top of that, there are some shots in this show, the first 4 episodes, where the composites are almost of the characters, the CGI characters, the Hulks, are almost kind of bleeding into the backgrounds, especially if it's a more darkly lit scene. Like there's
Yeah.
kind of shots where you'll see, you know, the characters standing in front of, you know, whether it be a darkly lit kind of room or something that kind of is a darker backdrop, and it almost looks like the CGI is kind of blending in to those
Interesting.
backdrops, and
Yeah.
it kind of is distracting on that kind of way.
Yeah.
But again, like, it's also it's still in an early phase of this character's design. So,
Yeah.
you know, you look at the evolution of the Hulk, even
Yeah.
from the Bana era, where,
Yeah.
you know, it's like the Bana Hulk kind of looks like Eric Bana, and then the
Yeah.
Edward Norton version
Didn't look
doesn't
like him at all.
And they tried to make him kind of almost weirdly look handsome in a way. Like, it was weird. And
Sexy Hulk.
Sexy Hulk. And then with this, like, you can tell with like Ruffalo, they've kind of perfected it because they've had, you know, multiple films to kind of play around with it.
Budget on those films, and then they can kind of, I don't know exactly how this shit works, but I'm assuming they lend the character model to the new VFX studio, whoever's animating it. So they've already worked on that character model so much, right? To your point. And I don't want to get too hung up on this because I really feel like it didn't distract me enough to be like, oh man, I can't watch this because of the CG. Because I do feel like when Jen is She-Hulk, I still find her very compelling and fun to watch, whether it's an action sequence, whether she's just in the law office, whether she's in a courtroom or anything like that. Like when she's She-Hulk, and I like her ability of like, one, not wanting this, like not wanting to be a superhero, and then on top of it being able to kind of and being, we'll get to Wong, but then being able to kind of control when she hulks out right away. Like she has full control of her powers. So I liked that kind of.
Well, it looks at gender with that as well. And I think that that's actually very smartly kind of attuned to the gender politics of, you know, a man versus a woman having those experiences. And like, you know, Bruce Banner talks about how he's had to kind of, over the years, find that common ground with the Hulk version of himself, and how anger in men is something that is that short fuse, and it's something where it's like, you know, not in every case, but in kind of a general kind of like TV show narrative, it's making a point that, you know, men are quick to respond in anger and in action, where women put up with bullshit,
so much bullshit that they've had to control their anger and stuff like that.
And it's a smart shorthand for not having to kind of like tell the same origin story again with, you know, the Hulk kind of mechanisms and sort of the explanation of like, this is you becoming a Hulk and this is what you have to go through.
Don't get angry. Like,
it's like, okay, I got it. Like, this is something, it's you know, I don't have to worry about it because we're different people. Just because we're cousins doesn't necessarily mean that we're going down the same, you know, path. And I think that that's interesting, but it's always been fascinating with the Hulk, just to kind of like gauge that the Incredible Hulk is still continuity within the MCU, and how
there's a fun joke in this series.
There is a good joke there, but it's also still just weird because like, I wonder if there will be a point where there is some sort of there's something more than just like a one-off joke, because it's just strange that we've had, you know, like the late William Hurt as you know, as Ross, as General Ross, and then, you know, there have been episodes of What If, even though they're maybe not canon, feature Betty Ross,
and Mark Ruffalo, right?
And Mark Ruffalo, and then Tim Roth as well, right? Where like it's a fascinating juxtaposition of going from the Edward Norton, Louis Leterrier Hulk movie that a lot of people, for the most part, kind of begrudgingly accept as, you know, canon within the MCU. But
well, it is, right? But like how I interpret that now with the multiverse stuff is that I interpret that is a variant version, but the exact same story played out with our Mark Ruffalo version as well. It's just we happen to see the Ed Norton version as, you know, breaking the fourth wall, us as an audience. So like I basically take that because it's an infinite multiverse, right? So like my head canon that I'm making up, which I just take as that was the exact same story that played out in our MCU 616, except the
Zanzibar
only
is featured in both.
yeah. Classic Zanzibar. I've been there too many times. Not too many, but like more than once is too many. And then I just take that as it played out exactly the same. It's just that was a different version of Bruce Banner that looks different. And, we saw that version just in our head. Think of that. There was also a version that was just Mark Ruffalo the whole time, where I don't know whether we'll ever get flashbacks or something like that, where they redo some scenes and bring Liv Tyler back or something like that for just a one-off or something like that to kind of finally say like that was canon, even though they have pretty much confirmed that. But I think there is some funny stuff in here that kind of pokes fun at that. And I think that's just it. The show is very playful. Like it is, I think women will really love this show. I watched, I think my wife will really love it. I think, we're getting to that point where it's not necessarily like, you don't look at it as like this one, like the WB thing of like this skews male and this skews female. Like it is for everyone. But like, I really do think that, this is Marvel trying to do some other things, go to different audiences, do something that's focused on something else. And I just like the fun vibe of this series of like, I love Jen's best friend Nikki and their relationship.
The paralegal,
Her paralegal. You get the Jameela Jamil coming in as Titania in the first episode, which is just like a very short kind of quick thing. But the Tim Roth stuff, like him coming back, I wasn't sure how that was going to work, and obviously that plays into the Benedict Wong with Wong coming back as well.
With Shang-Chi specifically.
Yeah, Shang-Chi, because we know that Abomination fought in that little tournament thing and the underground fight ring. But so I think that's kind of all interesting, and I think that's why this series is so interesting to me, is because it is episodic. It doesn't feel like it necessarily has like a season plot, although I think we'll get there. They're kind of planting the seeds with different things, but I'm amazed that they're involving more like different people from the MCU. Like there's more Wong than I expected in these first 4 episodes. Like I think
can't go wrong with
like the Abomination stuff I think is interesting where they were going with that. And yeah, I'm just and we know Charlie Cox is going to show up at some point. So like, people were asking for all this stuff like in some of the Marvel TV shows, always expecting like all these different cameos and all these different people. And the thing I want to say on that, like the show delivers on all of that, but it's still very much about Jennifer Walters and She-Hulk. Like I felt like even with those other characters, like it is that Harvey Birdman thing or that kind of stuff where they are complementing that character, and that character is very much involved with everything that's going on with these other characters. And I think it'll go to some places that you weren't expecting, and it has an overall very playful, fun vibe to it and tone to it, which I'm curious to see what I know there's those two sides of Marvel fans right now, that some people think the MCU's gotten a little bit too goofy and they've made the Hulk kind of a joke and they've made all these characters kind of more of a joke. And I don't know if that's going to appease them with how they treat Wong and Abomination like in this movie or in this show, but I enjoyed it thoroughly, and it does have that same why I love Harvey Birdman and why I like sitting there with you is like you never know who's going to show up that week, of what court case is going to happen, but then there's going to be some other hijinks or fun stuff going on besides the courtroom drama element or courtroom comedy element of it.
Yeah, I don't think it's as funny as Harvey Birdman.
No,
I think
agree,
that this is very hit and miss with its humor, and I think that's another thing that Marvel does try a little too hard with. Although I do agree that I like the tone, that it is very light and kind of just enjoyable, and it's not necessarily kind of dark and brooding, or like it's not necessarily like, okay, well, this looming threat is really kind of like the whole sort of antithesis of this.
There was one episode
series
where I thought they were getting into that, and I'm glad that it was just kind of a one-off thing.
Yeah, and with that, like, it kind of feels like this is just like a fun TV show that you can kind of still be, it can still be appointment viewing, and it's still going to be a show that people will tune into each and every week, but it's not necessarily something where it's like the MCU has gotten so dense that I feel like it's nice to get something that's just kind of enjoyable again, like this, not like taking itself too seriously, but it does have something to say with with the gender politics is as already mentioned, and you know, I think that the head writer and creator Jessica Gao is really kind of, you know, taking into consideration that it can be fun. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom, Doctor Doom and Gloom. It can be just pure entertainment, and it can be something where it's like, okay, this is why you know, watch a show like this, is you kind of enjoy the character dynamics, as goofy as they might be. And again, you know, the humor doesn't always work, but you have a lead who is likable enough, and personable enough, and someone you want to root for, you know, and succeeding in, you know, their day-to-day life, that it's like, okay, like that makes it all work, and you are kind of excited by the possibilities of who could this character interact with next week, and what kind of ridiculous, you know, plot line could be introduced on a weekly basis. And I think being episodic isn't necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of the shows that we have gotten so far have been bridges to other movies, or have been, you know, integral to the MCU overall, where, you know, this show, like, I'm sure, you know, Jennifer
I think there is some stuff there that is
there is
integral,
no, but I think, like, it's not necessarily thinking about, like, okay, well, we have to have, like, every piece of the puzzle kind of, you know, move
this is going to set up
characters
this
to the
movie or
chessboard.
this
Exactly. Like, it's actually kind of having fun within the moment, and that kind of, I think, is the strongest aspect of this show, next to Tatiana Maslany's wonderful performance. And again, just like she kind of centers this whole thing. It's also kind of fun to see someone like Billy Walsh, aka Reese Corio, Billy Walsh from Entourage, the director of Queens Boulevard.
Yeah.
Who, funnily enough, I didn't realize that the director of this, Kat Corio, is Reese's wife. But then on top of that, Kat Corio directed "Marry Me," which is that Owen Wilson, Jennifer Lopez film, which was
that my
so
mom
corny.
And mom and Nevis watched on the flight home from Croatia, so I thought that was funny.
This is much better, and I think I just like the idea of one director directing all the episodes. Like, there's just a consistency.
Well, she split this with
she did.
Yeah, the next 4 are going to be directed by Anu Valia.
Okay.
But then she comes back and directs the last 2. So it's only 2 directors, and they split 4, 4, and 2. So
because we've been seeing that a lot with the MCU shows, where a director kind of will set things up, and then you'll bring in other filmmakers. I kind of wish that they would have, like, one person direct all the episodes. It just kind of feels like there is more of a chance
in
for
a show like
this,
where it is a little bit more episodic. I don't mind it as much, even though I like that Kat Corio directed all 4 that we watched. But I don't mind maybe 2 different directors splitting half and half. Like, that seems okay to me, because a director pair can work pretty well together. But it's when you bring in 5 or 6 different directors, I feel like all my favorite TV shows have one singular vision and person behind them, right? And you might say that that's Kevin Feige in the MCU anyway, but I feel like they do so much now that he can only be like, you know, sure, he's the guy calling the shots, but like, I'm sure he's spread a little thin. But I thought Kat Corio did a great job. I again, the vibe is really, really funny. I do think it has some pretty interesting implications in the MCU and teases for stuff. Like, I was surprised that we got that from this show. I really was surprised at how they used Wong and how much he's in the show. And I'm just kind of curious, like you said, to see who shows up each week. But it is very much, I'm like more interested in just Jen, you know, being
in the
a
real
lawyer
world,
and like, and her life and as She-Hulk, and balancing that, and not necessarily wanting to be She-Hulk, and hates that name too, but like, but her doing it because she needs a job, and you know, it's you know, and then she has to become a superhero for certain reasons, because she just feels obligated to help people in certain moments. Like, I think that's kind of interesting. And then there was something else I wanted to bring up.
It's her career as well. We should like that. Like that, it's something that she does have a passion for, and like that's interesting.
That's what she
as
wants
well.
to do. Yeah,
You know,
and I agree, and I like there's a moment, it's not spoiling, but like how they even deal with her, you know, trying to find a job and all the politics there and kind of that bullshit
It's
is like
similar
interesting.
to Falcon and the Winter Soldier,
Yeah.
where Sam is trying to get a bank loan, where like
Yeah.
you are now seeing these post Avenger movies where the heroes are not getting probably what you would expect from, it almost, again, I don't want to compare it to the two because
Yeah.
it's a very different situation, but like the idea of like the Vietnam vet coming back from, the war and kind of basically being forgotten and neglected by, the rest of America, to the point where, you kind of go to drugs and alcohol and don't really have the support system that you need to kind of, maintain a healthy lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so like with She-Hulk and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you're seeing kind of the bureaucracy of life kind of be the ultimate villain,
For these heroes.
for the hero characters who, are willing to risk it all and put their life on the line to protect complete strangers and do the right thing. But when it comes to, their personal success and their personal sort of moments of need, they always kind of get pushback, and they really, could become godlike figures in the way that like something like The Boys kind of
Yeah.
portrays, but they never do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's really well put. The other thing, there's a cameo in this that is, I think, a cameo no one will be expecting from this show, because I definitely wasn't, and I don't want to get your hopes up because it's not like, it's just, I'm gonna say that because it's like, I think it's that kind of show where it's just like very silly, and I think this plot line that I'm talking about, which you guys will see in like episode 3, I think, um I was like back and forth on, because I think to your point, Eric, where the comedy doesn't always land, but it did have that Harvey Birdman vibe to it, where I was
Right.
just like, okay, I'm kind of, this is silly, and I'm not sure why it's included in this episode, but then they do obviously bring the plots together, and for one little revelation. Yeah, revelation. So I thought that was interesting, but there's a cameo where I'm like, okay, didn't expect to see that person in this show, but okay. And
Well,
who I'm
there
talking about, but
yeah, but there's
yeah.
also more references to things that are in the
In the real
in the
world,
real
yeah.
world.
The Sopranos thing he's watching on
Yeah.
HBO Max, which I
Yeah.
think is really funny.
Or
Like right
even like
after.
Inside Out, right? Like
Yeah.
like there's weird kind of references to things that are real, or even, I mean, obviously Pixar is under the same umbrella with Disney,
Yeah.
but the, the Sopranos thing, like it's just, it's strange now that we're getting these references kind of integrated into a kind of real world setting, but then there's still scenes where, they're talking about the history books in Captain America and stuff like that, and it is kind of strange, like what is, canon and what's not. I mean, we talked about Riz Ahmed and Ms. Marvel, and sort of, like, so there is a Riz Ahmed in the MCU that's just Riz Ahmed, and like that is weird as well because of
Yeah.
him being in Venom, and like, so it makes you wonder like what the layers are there with, the meta quality, and I think that it can play into that even more. Like, I wouldn't be surprised, when we do get Daredevil, that there probably will be some reference to the Ben Affleck movie, in some capacity. There has to be.
Yeah.
Like, it just kind of feels like that would be the perfect place for that. And even though I think that, like, I hate saying this, it does kind of feel like this is almost like a testing ground for Deadpool 3, to kind of
Mm-hmm.
be like, okay, like, is this fourth wall
With
thing
the meta
going to
comedy, and
work?
yeah.
Even though, I mean, the She-Hulk comics are fourth wall breaking,
Yep.
so it's not like it's doing it just because it's like, taking the idea of something like Fleabag, which is also a much better series than this. Harvey Birdman and Fleabag are like the top tier versions of what this wants to be. This is still very much a young show. But it is also much better than, say, like visual effects wise, than, like you mentioned Ally McBeal at the beginning. There's no horrible dancing CGI baby in an episode, but there is
Not yet, Eric. Not yet.
there is Mark Lynn Baker, who plays Jennifer's dad,
Yeah.
in this, who probably a lot of people grew up watching Perfect Strangers in syndication or when it was on, and then also he was on The Leftovers as Mark Lynn-Baker, which was funny as well.
That was very funny. Yeah. I'm trying to think, because now that they're referencing real world things, I'm like, when does the blip happen? Because I guess Inside Out was in 2015, so that would have been pre-blip. So during the blip, did all those Pixar movies not come out that came out during
And
the blip?
there
And
is a Canadian reference as well. So Eamon Vellani mentions being a Canadian in one episode of Ms. Marvel, and then there's a reference to Winnipeg, which I think that's where Maslany is originally from, because I think she now lives in Toronto or LA.
She's
or
from
something.
Regina,
Saskatchewan,
but everyone go watch the Experience Regina video on YouTube. It's some good shit. Some good shit. Yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of this. I'm very excited to watch episodes 5 through 9. Again, curious to see where it goes, if it's going to stick with this kind of episodic kind of format. I do think episode 4 was the weakest for me out of the 4. But that being said, I can see them planting the seeds to what the overall, whether villain or thread, is going to be throughout the show, or who the main antagonist is going to be. I don't know if they're going to have like a season plot, or if it's just going to be kind of her dealing with cases each week and then kind of having other stuff go on in the background. There's got to be a season arc that we just, after 4 episodes. I worry about that, because some people about Mandalorian said the same thing, right? Where it was just kind of like that, not monster of the week format, but that little bit more of an episodic format that people, if you don't have that through line, like some people don't love that. But I'm with you where this does feel like the most TV, because they are kind of trying to, I guess WandaVision as well, but like they are taking inspiration from those Law shows and kind of make that the MCU version of that, which I think is kind of fun. And I think that's like, I think
Mind Talk, the Mind Builder.
Yeah, like I can't wait to see that. I know we know Frogman is appearing in the series and stuff like that. Like there's going to be really silly kind of heroes that are going to pop up, and
like MODOK in season 2 or 3 of this show would be amazing, or like the most ridiculous characters coming with like a case or something like that. Like I think even like with WandaVision, like you could have all of Westview filing some sort of suit against Wanda,
white Vision, because Wanda's gone or something. Like I don't know, like I'm very curious to see where it goes, and I'm having a blast with it. I put this more in the category of Ms. Marvel and WandaVision and Loki, like on that upper tier of shows. I know we've only seen not even half of them, but like I have the same vibes from this than I did from those first couple episodes of Ms. Marvel, where I'm like, smile across my face, thoroughly enjoying them. Not like Moon Knight, that felt like a little bit of a chore to get through by the end of it, and even Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I thought started strong, but then kind of you could see some of the issues with the reshoots and stuff as that show went on, and it kind of fell apart near the end, where I really am enjoying this, and I think it's in that, oh, okay, I like when Marvel does something a little bit different. It's still very comic booky, it's still very MCU, but like I like this episodic Law format. I think Tatiana Maslany is incredible and just very charismatic, and the reason to kind of watch this show. And I think she is excellent. And to Eric's point, like Canadians are kind of taking over this new MCU, which I think is kind of fun. So I'm really enjoying
it'd be a really good episode of the show. It will never happen in a million years, but Kevin Feige sues Sony for the rights back of Venom and Morbius.
They just really break the fourth wall, like fully.
And Jared Leto comes on the episode. It's like, no, I still want to play Morbius.
Yeah, I'd love if multiverse stuff, you could get really silly things of bringing in like other characters, and I wanted to go full Harvey Birdman, but like
oh man, it's too that is too niche and too deadpan and just too weird, I think, for a mainstream audience to really kind of like contend with, where like you watch that on, when it was originally on, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, like it kind of played with the Hanna-Barbera and classic cartoons, and kind of subverted your expectations of like what would happen if they were in kind of a more adult legal system and kind of being feted through the system.
Yeah.
Rewatching an episode of Fred Flintstone becoming Tony Soprano, that episode was incredible. But then there's also like an episode that I rewatched again because of the Jetsons, or George Jetson being born recently, where the Jetsons come back to the past to sue us because of what we've done with global warming.
That's
but it's
really
also
good.
but it's also funny because like George is such this condescending asshole to Harvey Birdman. He's like, we're from the year 2002, you lower life form. And one of the best jokes, and like, it's just a cut. It's literally Harvey sitting at his desk listening to George, give his spiel, and then Harvey Birdman looks at his calendar and it says the year is 2004, where this guy from the future 2002.
Yeah.
Like, just shit like that is funny.
Yeah, that is really good. And I hope, that meta humor is really, really good, right? And you get a bit of that in this show, and I hope they go even further with it. So there's some really clever stuff. So we're not going to put a score on this one, but I think we both think it's worth checking out.
Yeah, it's
definitely.
fun.
Yeah, I'm curious on the week-to-week thing. Like, we got to kind of binge 4 episodes, which was nice, but I think each week it does enough to go, oh yeah, damn, I do want to come back to see next week. And I'm very excited in a month from now to be able to watch episode 5. So that's the one kind of, very lucky to, get this stuff early. But now I'm like, all right, now I got to go a month without, which is kind of okay. We're at that point, I think whenever we do these Marvel reviews, we always talk about like the state of the MCU a little bit. And there was those comments from Damon Lindelof and Mark Ruffalo recently of like how much Marvel content we're getting, or Marvel shows and movies. And I
kind of agree with Damon Lindelof.
So do I agree. And this is someone who loves the MCU. Like, you guys, whoever listens, like, you guys know how much I really get invested into this and really, really love it. And Eric's kind of more in the middle, but I'm on Lindelof's side too. It's what I always said about Star Wars. It's, you want the next thing, right? Like, you want to anticipate the next thing. But when you have 3 to 4 movies now, I think mostly 3 to 4 movies per year, 4 to 5 shows per year, like, it's just a constant flow. And I know each one is different, or they're trying to be different in each one of these shows. And that's why I hope we get stuff that feels different each time. But when it is this shared universe, and stuff like that, and you're getting characters from that you've seen in other things, and recently we've got so much Wong, the Wong CU, like, which is good.
Benedict Wong is just at home, like, looking at all the money he's making.
Good for him, dude. Like, I'm all for it, and I love that it brings everything together, kind of thing. But I'd be okay if it was like, we just maybe a little less, like, just like,
well, it makes you want, like, to your point, like, it makes you want that next thing a little bit more, because you're not being oversaturated or homogenizing, the marketplace with just that one type of movie, where, like, I think that's why a lot of people have been really excited about films like RRR and Top Gun Maverick and Nope, because they're still blockbuster movies, but at the same time they're not necessarily connected to anything else, with the exception of Top Gun. But like, even that kind of felt like its own thing, so it's just kind of nice to kind of have that break. And I also get where, the pandemic that year, where we didn't really get anything, kind of felt like, okay, well, release the floodgates at this point. But like, I wouldn't be against like having maybe like 2 Marvel movies a year, and maybe
bookend the year, or have one in the summer and one in the winter, or something like that. And like, I think 2 movies, 3 series, that's still a lot. Like,
it is.
I mean, I'd almost rather like 2 series, 2 movies, right? You have like maybe a series to start the year, a show in the summer, a series in the fall, and then a movie in the winter. Like, that sounds kind of perfect to me. Like, that's still a lot. But and we have usually 3 to 4 movies, depending if there's a Spider-Man movie, and then 4 shows, it seems like, per year now too, right? So, and that's not counting animated stuff that might come out, or shorts. And all this stuff, which it's a lot, but I obviously enjoy it still. And
I'm
each
saying
one
that I'm still
I
excited for Black Panther Wakanda Forever.
same. And
So
and the rest of the next phase, right? And all of the shows, like I'm excited for them, and I hope each one feels different enough. That's all you want. You don't want them to feel samey. That's, I guess, the one worry, right? Even if it's sharing characters in a universe and things like that. But I'm obviously very excited. And we didn't talk much about Ruffalo, but I thought he was good in the when he shows up. Like, I like him, training his cousin and their interactions
get him, cuz
in Mexico. Yeah. Like, I think there's more of him than I expected as well. And I think that was like, again, with all of the different people who show up, there was always more than I expected, but it didn't take away from it being a She-Hulk show. So.
Well, I feel if this was a show that was made in like the 80s or 90s, you would be lucky to maybe get a cameo either at the beginning of the series or at the end with the character that kind of was the spin-off or kind of the alchemist of the new series. Like, I look at something like Supergirl, which is a terrible movie, and I don't mean to compare Supergirl and She-Hulk, but Supergirl, like, didn't even have Christopher Reeves in it. Like, they said that, Superman was off planet saving somebody else, but Jimmy Olsen was available, so they had that character in it to kind of like, connect the continuity of it all. But yeah, like, it's just interesting where, like, we live in a world now where that is really important, where if you do have a spin-off series with another character, but people are more familiar with the another version or somebody that's related, it's like you have to have that character kind of help set things up.
And
right?
They do a good job with it here. I think their chemistry is actually really good, and I liked their back and forth. I thought it was very playful, very funny. Again, sets the tone off right away, like, of being, serious, but then not very serious right away. And then I just kind of liked them hanging out off the grid in Mexico and seeing where Mark Ruffalo has been hanging out and where his lab is and all that kind of stuff. Like, kind of filling in the gaps.
Was
Not
that where Venom was?
He was in Mexico, I think, but it wasn't at the Hulk's house, I don't think. But like,
because he
that's
does
probably
mention
close.
Hulk in when Venom is in the MCU.
So maybe the people in Mexico are more familiar, that maybe they know Hulk is hanging out there. And I think there's some great, it's filling in the gaps, or not retconning, but like explaining certain things where people are like, where was he when he was creating Smart Hulk, and like, would he have this place, and like,
Abomination as well,
what's he's been doing. Abomination as well. And like, I'll be interested to see how people think they treat that character too. Like, I liked it. I thought Tim Roth was great. But
post-credit scenes, apparently there are post-credit scenes for every episode.
There are, and the ones that we watch all had them. They vary from very funny to teasing something. I think most of the time they're just like a goofy. There's one that I just cackled that I thought was really, really great, about Captain America. And Captain America's not in it or anything. They're just talking about Captain America, and I thought that was really, really funny. But each one I thought they're mostly just mid-credit scenes, and they're mostly played for laughs, but definitely stick around for those. Just super enjoyable. Check it out. It comes out this Thursday. They changed the release date for I think they're doing that so it doesn't overlap with Andor, correct?
Which is going to be September, right? Because that was originally supposed to be the end of August.
Yes. But they pushed it. And I think they saw when they had Obi-Wan and Miss Marvel coming out on the same day that wasn't a great call.
Right.
So this is premiering August 18th, the first episode, and then it'll be weeklies on Thursdays. Weeklies on Thursdays. And Thursdays feels like a law show day to me, though, too. Like, I almost wish they would premiere this at 8 p.m. Eastern or whatever. Like
I would say Tuesday's a law day.
Oh, really?
Thursday kind of feels like that day where it's like you're a little bit more relaxed, like, because Friday's like right around the corner. Where I almost feel like Tuesday is like, it's not Monday, but you still have that week to go, and you still got a lot of prep, and you got to get that court case ready, to do on Wednesday
Sure, I just
or
meant like a
Thursday.
network TV, like what day they would premiere Law
Sure.
shows on. So I'm maybe thinking, I don't know, weeknight at 8 p.m. is always what I think of, but maybe any weeknight would have been fine. But
we got to look at like old studio programming and scheduling, because like I know like there was always like that thing where like you never want to have your show air on the weekend because nobody's gonna watch, because
Fridays were no one ever wanted to do, which I think is interesting that Disney did premiere stuff on Fridays originally. Remember?
Yeah, I think it was always like that sweet spot was somewhere between Monday to
Sundays were always HBO nights, right? So
Yeah.
no one wanted to do that. And then
Monday to Wednesday seemed to kind of be like that kind of like, okay, people are at home in the evening, like let's like between like 7 and 10 are like that like that's the like after the news at 6 kind of thing, when it was network television.
Yeah. Ally McBeal premiered September 8th, 1997, which was a Monday.
Yeah.
So maybe Mondays were more like the beginning of the week, like you were saying. So I don't know. Anyways, we're getting off track. Go check out She-Hulk this Thursday when it comes out, and then weekly after that. We'll probably talk about it on a weekly basis over on the Untitled Movie Podcast, which you guys can go check out a new episode right now where Eric and I talk about stuff. I don't know what. Probably some Dragon Ball. What
Bodies,
else?
Bodies. I'm reading Heat 2.
Oh, Eric's a reading boy.
Yeah, I'm an
reading
intellectual.
a book, little smarty pants.
I know.
I don't read that often.
One day I'm gonna grow up and become a lawyer and pass the bar. And
we talk about a book once every 3 years on this show.
Yeah.
Either I read one or Eric reads one. So we'll talk about a book and other things. So go check that out. Go check out our I Am Groot review. Much shorter than this, much shorter series than this, which you guys can go check out right now.
We're covering Fan Expo this year now.
We are next, not this upcoming weekend, but the weekend after. So we'll cover that on
Cobra Kai.
They're not coming. They canceled.
Damn it.
Yeah, which sucks. But we'll still review Cobra Kai and stuff like that too. But one-stop shop for everything. Head over to Untitled_movies on Letterboxd and you'll find everything there. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com and soon on season 4 of Family Feud Canada that's premiering in September. But I'll let you guys know closer to that date. Follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
Yeah, and you wouldn't like me when I'm angry, but also you can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene. The latest episode has Matt and I talking about Tiff and the Batgirl breakdown. So if you like watching or listening to this show, but want it to be a half an hour long with no swearing, that's where you want to be, baby. You can also find me on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
We find the defendant guilty.
Green. I should have made my lights green, but next time.
Green giant.